So here we have in a test flight, guys. I really wanted to do this video for a long time. It is a video that probably will not get too much attention right now, but eventually people will, hopefully find this helpful. And I'm gonna show to you guys in probably two separate videos what are the keys that I use depending on the type of battle that I use. So here today we're gonna talk about all the keys that you have to have for using in an air battle, especially with jets, with raiders and everything. And of course, especially for top tier, okay? So we are here in the Autofighter, we're gonna change it up to some other aircraft later, okay? So, first of all, you need a button, of course, the basic buttons. Of course, you need the mouse, of course, obviously. You need a button to accelerate, to deaccelerate, and to have buttons on the keyboard for you to actually pull up, pull down, to roll the aircraft left to right, and then to, use the rudder. So these are the basic ones that you need. The ones that I use, of course, you can change it up, but the ones that I use the throttle axis, left control, and left shift to actually accelerate with left shift and deaccelerate with the control. And of course, I use relative control over here, and I take it out the option over here that you have to hold the button to actually use WEP, which is the afterburner, right? So let me just find it where it is. It's right here. It's in the controls. I thought it was in the options, but yeah, hold throttle for WEP. I would just leave it no. That way you can basically just click a button. You don't have to keep clicking it and holding it. This is a lot more useful for air realistic battles and simulator and everything. So yeah, and of course, you can do with this small clicks with the shift, as you see, to get 107 instead of 110 or 104, a little bit more, a little bit less with the afterburner so that you can control it a little bit better, okay? It's important to notice the sensitivity of any relative control. For example, here I'm using 100%, but there are others that you need to take it down a little bit, okay? These are the main buttons for accelerating. Of course, roll axis, A, D, WS, and the mouse, of course. These are normal ones. The yaw, of course, Q and E. These are the main ones that I use for just controlling the aircraft, okay? Then we have some other controls, like for example, the C button, which is standard, if you're not mistaken, to look around. So if you hold C, you will just, look around. Of course, you can change it up, but this is the main one. Another one that is very important, the V button that I use to changing the camera, right? So that you can actually go for the TV system, for example, or the cockpit or anything that you want, okay? This helps a lot as well with many situations. Then let's go talk about a little bit of the other buttons that you're gonna use to control the performance of the aircraft. So one of them, of course, is the air brake, so that you can actually decrease the speed of your aircraft very fast using basically aerodynamic drag, right? So depending on the aircraft, you will have this or not, of course, but yeah, I use for this button the X. You can just go here, click air or air brake, right? Is it? Yeah, toggle air brake, and I use the X button of my keyboard, which is very close to the rest of them to actually use this. Then another one, a little bit more controversial, this one, okay? So let me take it down the speed a little bit. So the flaps. So normally people use the F key to toggle the flaps, right? I don't like that. I'm gonna show later on why, but I use two buttons that are, I'm gonna show to you guys, but basically one to go up and down, that you can control each stage of the flap, like you see. Raise it, take off, landing, if it has combat, so you can control it. Now, and it's not just a toggle, right? So you're gonna go to flaps and see, I do have a button for toggle, but I normally don't use it. And I use these two buttons, which are basically, I don't even know the names of these, but they're basically on the right side of the P. Of course, I'm using Latin American, keyboard, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, it's basically the two buttons on the side of P, right? The left one I use for going up with the flaps, and then the other one on the right to go down. So these are the two ones. Of course, I still have the toggle button here on the equal sign, on the side of backspace, but still you can change it up to any other one that you use. It's a little bit further away from the normal controls, but normally you don't use this in a combat scenario unless in a very specific situation. So I don't mind to just move around, but you can change it up with other ones. And I'm gonna show why I don't use the F or like the F key later, okay? Of course, you need the G key for the gear, as you see. I don't want to break them, but yeah, you get the point. Of course, this is a toggle button, normal button, of course. And then another button that I use caps lock to actually engage the maneuver mode. So as you see, maneuver on, maneuver off. You know, so you can, you know, change it up to have that on a very quick button. This is a button that you need to get, like, be closer to your aircraft commands button, right? So I use caps lock, which is just on the side there, which is pretty good. Another button that you need is drop additional fuel tanks. Of course, if you want to, only the F-111s have that, but the fuel dumping is also a good option to have. But yeah, the drop fuel tanks is also a pretty good one. I use the 0 key above the letters, right? So I just click and it will go there. Again, further away, you have to have in mind, guys, that the control of the aircraft itself is where you need on your keyboard to have the main things of the aircraft that you use a lot. And then the further or the least usable thing you are using in the battle, you're going further and further from the buttons, right? So, for example, I use 0 here, but I could use B, for example, that I normally don't use for anything. But you do you, right? But it's a button that it's important to have, okay? Then let's talk about weapons. So if we go to weapons, we're gonna have some choices that you have to make. I'm gonna show to you guys how I do it, and I think this is the best way, okay? So the first thing is that you need this button on the session settings over here in air battles, automatic activation of, where is it? Here, automatic activation of aircraft weapon selection and mission start. You have to have this on. I normally use some other things, like for example, the enable automatic countermeasure release and mission start. This is for the malls, right? I like to have it on. Sometimes I turn it off, but you can have a button for that as well. But it's not that important, but still. I put the button to, of course, have the radar on at the start of the match, use the rectangular radar indicator. So I would use these settings that I'm showing to you guys. These would be the easier ones, okay? But the way that you use the weapons, so this is the normal automatic way. So you get into a match, you're gonna use the automatic selection, right? Automatically, basically, in the sense so that it is already doing that. So instead of having, for example, a button to fire the missile, a button to fire a rocket, as you see over here, a button to fire an air-to-ground missile, a rocket salvo, a button to drop a bomb, each of these having a button it's specifically to it, you're gonna have one button for the cannon and one button to fire secondary weapons. That's the main idea. So fire primary weapons, this would be the cannon. So I use, of course, the left mouse button. And then fire secondary weapons, okay? And how it would work is that you can choose between them using another button and then fire the specific one. So instead of having, you know, one button for each, you have one to choose what you're using and one to fire. So in this case, I use space to fire the secondary, and to choose what it is, I use Alt, as you see over here. I can have primary weapons as well. This is for more like props that have multiple gun calibers and stuff. You can choose between the calibers to shoot. Normally jets don't have that, so I don't use it. I play mostly jets, right? So, but yeah, basically how it works is that you're gonna have a button you can choose, like see on the left side of the screen up top, the missile that I'm using. If I click Alt, it will go between the AIM-120C5 in this case and the AIM-9M, right? And if I choose a target, so let me just find a target over here. We're gonna talk about the lock buttons and everything later, but so how I'm gonna do it right now is basically I just choose the missile, in this case the C5. I'm gonna click space to arm it up the missile, and then I'm gonna fire the missile. I use a secondary button to arm it up the missile, which is the right mouse button as well that you can use. So you can use both, okay? How it works is basically that you have these weapon lock, air-to-air, air-to-ground, and lock, and then you can use the fire button to warm it up as well. Every single weapon like this have kind of a warm it up, so and then you fire the missile, right? So again, let me just have a lock over here. If I can, please, Raider. There you go. So yeah, I will talk about the lock, but the way that you have to work is basically choose with the Alt whatever missile you want. For example, in this case, you're gonna click the button to fire, and then you will warm it up and you can fire. Or you click the, in this case, right side mouse button to warm it up, and then just click once the space button, okay? With the other missiles, it will be the same, but you have to have a lock, okay? So this is how I do things, okay? Another cool thing that you have to understand here is that, for example, for IR missiles, if you have, why do I have a lock button? It's basically to reset whatever lock I want. So if I didn't have that, once the missile got a lock on to somebody, you couldn't actually do anything unless you fire the missile. But with this button, you can ignore it. You can cancel the lock, right? So I have a lock here, but I don't want to fire in this target. I want to fire on that target. So I click the button to weapon lock again. It resets the seeker, okay? So that way you can actually choose the exact target that you want, especially with IR missiles. So these are the main buttons for weapons and everything in a general sense. We're going to talk about air to ground later. Then the radar. So the radar has multiple buttons. I use a lot of them, okay? So of course, each of these buttons is kind of necessary, to be honest. But yeah, let's start with the easy one. Turn it on and off. So you have a button to turn it on and off, as you see. So off and on, okay? You have buttons to control the radar itself. So you will have, for example, to switch between the radar and the IRST. So if the aircraft has an IRST, I use the tab button. So IRST, radar, IRST, radar, you can toggle between them. You will have the button to change the mode, the search mode, the elevation, direction, to bore, sight, scope scale. All of these, I use the numpad. So 1 through 6, basically, right? So I use, for example, the 1 to actually choose the, the amount of detection that you are, the mode of the radar. So, for example, search plus Doppler, TWS, search plus Doppler HDN, velocity, GMTI, whatever, right? I choose the button 2 to basically the scan zone itself, what it's gonna be, smaller, bigger, the button 3 in the numpad I use for the range, so it changes the range. And I use the 5 button to basically turn it on and off the stabilization, right? So for example, if I click again, it will stabilize itself for where I'm looking. So if I change it up where the radar is over here, it will always be stabilized to where it is. If I click the button again, it will always be wherever I put it before and not stabilize it to where I'm pointing the aircraft, okay? And then I can reset as well. So if I point upwards, for example, if I click the 6 button, it will reset itself. At least in theory, it's not working for some reason, but you get the point. This radar is not working. Maybe I have to have this. Yeah, now it's working, see? So it just resets to whatever I'm looking, right? Another button, I use the Z key to actually go between, within visual range and beyond visual range. So you can click it and you will see that it goes to the, short range acquiring mode, or in this case, that this aircraft has a helmet, to the helmet, okay? And of course, I need a button to get a lock on. So I use the middle mouse button, which is the best one. Why do I not use the select radar target to lock? Because I use an option over here that I think it's the best one. You go to options and you're going to turn it off, the target cyclic switching of the aircraft's radar. That means that instead of cycling between all the targets that it's detecting and then you click the button on whatever the target is, so you lose a lot of time because you have to cycle between all the targets, you can just change it up where the radar is looking, as you see on the right side there, and then put whatever the aircraft is at, more or less, right? And then you're going to click the button to get a lock, and you get a lock, right? So middle mouse button is the lock button that I use. And then to do this, to change it up, I basically use these buttons over here. So basically the arrows, right? So for example here, horizontal, I use left and right. So you're going to look, left or right with the radar. A vertical, up and down. This is basically the range that you're going to try to get a lock on. And then the tilt of the antenna. I hold right control because it's right on the side there, and then up and down. So again, sideways, if I even change this, it will look sideways. See? This, I use the range, as you see. So above, it's a higher range. Below, it's a lower range. And then the tilt control, that you can look upwards and downwards on the actual scan zone. So if you have this, the lock button, the within visual range, I know it's a lot of buttons, but yeah, you should be able to go out there, detect targets, get a lock on, and fire a missile. Okay? So we're just gonna control it wherever the target is. We're gonna find the target there, choose whatever it is, choose the missile, click the button to fire, and then fire the missile. So these are the main ones for an air battle, okay? I'm gonna show some other little things for a ground battle. I'm gonna do another video, but in a general sense, this is it, okay? There are other ones, but these are it. I'm just gonna show one little thing that I, talked about before. And then we have some other interesting aircraft in the game. So aircraft that, for example, have like wings that sweep around, that go forwards and backwards and everything, right? How do I control this? So this is where I use the normal flap buttons, the F, for example. So normally I would go here to control, right? And I would add a button to toggle if I can control the, if it's actually changing or if it's automatic. So I'm gonna give an example. Let me just find a button over here where it is. Yeah, here. Switch wing sweep control mode. You're gonna use one of these, and I use wing sweep with the F and R, right? What that means is that basically, if I click one, it will go between the semi-auto or manual mode to the auto mode. So the auto mode, the wing sweep will change around automatically. The semi-auto will have some standards. We will not let you do some things, but you control it. And if the aircraft has a manual mode, like, for example, I think the F-14 has one, or some other aircraft like that, you can just pull on, do whatever you want. And then I'm going to use the F to go, forwards with the wing, and then the R to go backwards. Why do I have it so close? Because some aircraft will not have this. So basically the problem is that most aircraft will not have these, but the aircraft that use these need to have a control in the sweep mode very close to your fingers. So if you don't fly these aircraft, you don't need to use these buttons, but if you do, you absolutely need to use them, and it needs to be closer to your control AWSD, right? So this is the main thing. And another thing is that there are aircraft that have a thrust vectoring, right? So I actually just got a new keyboard over here. I'm gonna do it with you guys, but basically you need to change the thrust vector of these. So we're gonna just use basically the same buttons because there is no aircraft in the game that uses the wing sweep together with a thrust vectoring, right? So you just click here. We're gonna go to minimum value. You're gonna just add instead of replace. Then you're gonna go here, R, add instead of replace. I think it's relative control, right? We're gonna use like 60% over here. And then we're gonna go, and what that will do is basically change the thrust vector control of the Harrier, for example. It's mostly Harriers or VTOL vehicles that will have this, but it's important for you to actually have these. You can use these in a dogfight, and you need them to be able to use them in landing and stuff like that, right? So all of these buttons are the main ones. Of course, there are other ones, like, for example, I use the 6, which is the main one for extinguish fires, for example. There are many others that you can use, but these are the main ones that you need, absolutely need. There are ignite boosters, for example. There are buttons for every single thing. I use, for example, the minus button for the igniting of the boosters. So every single vehicle that you have will have some differences and some buttons that it needs to actually be using. But these are the ones that I use, okay? Might not be the best way possible, but it is the way that it's wired to my brain, and it is the way that I play, okay? So there was it. If you guys like this video, let me know in the comments, and I will do one for air-to-ground, battles, because, of course, this video is already too long to actually include those, so it will be like 40 minutes. But yeah, there's so many buttons in the game, so it's something that you have to have. One last thing that I need to talk about is just the flares and chaff, okay? You need a flares and chaff button. So yeah, flares and chaff. I would advise you guys to have 2 buttons for, one for each. So I use the 2 extra buttons that I have on my mouse. But of course, you can use in some other way. If you have a normal mouse, for example, just use a keyboard button that it's very close for your fingers there. 2, 3, something like that. or FRR or something like that, right? So I use, for example, let me just find it, fire flare button, mouse button 5, so the side button, right? And then the chaff button as well, mouse button 4. So I have 2 extra ones. I prefer to have 1 button for each instead of switching between them. It's faster, but you can switch between them. You just need to turn it on one setting. Actually, you don't need a setting. You just need this button. If you want to switch between them, you can with 1 button to switch between the 2 and then 1 to fire. And then you have just 1 button to fire them. But I prefer to have 1 button to flares and 1 to chaff, okay? So basically, this is it. I hope you enjoyed. I see you guys on the next one. Make sure to subscribe. And bye, guys. See ya.